Well, that brings up a great point. A lot of times when I explore this topic and I have discussions with people, there's this sense that anybody who's within Christendom is operating differently than the Vikings. Now, the Viking Age Scandinavians at the beginning of the Viking Age had a very distinct culture, language, etc. But in terms of the warrior culture of this idea of I'm going to go out and I'm going to gain wealth, I mean that was still common, even though they'd Christianized, say, like in France, the Carolingians, right? Like the whole reason Charlemagne was so expansionist wasn't because he was inherently interested in spreading Christendom. It's because he had a retinue of warriors who needed to be paid, and to pay them, they had to raid and conquer, etc. And so if Vikings show up off the coast of France, and there's a local lord who's got a bunch of knights that he's not paying properly, and then the Vikings say, well, hey, we have all this silver. Next thing you know, these guys are all going Viking, right, just for a short amount of time. So this idea that they would be able to hire mercenaries essentially within the areas that they're going, so then I can show up, so then I don't need 1,000 men to take Paris. I need 250 convincing, lethal looking guys, and then I can hire Frisians and Normans and everybody, and then coalesce. So essentially these fleets were probably, and I think there's a study that just came out that's showing this. I didn't read it yet, but it was making the news or the rounds on social media about how diverse of a group we're talking about too, because there's a lot of intermixing. There's that DNA study that was done a couple of years ago where they showed, it was a National Geographic that said, oh, we actually found out that these people were from all over and they were intermixing and everything. Okay, that makes sense. There's a new study that came out that actually showed that the composition of these groups wasn't the same through, like they were like you said, like these small pockets, but it's not just small pockets of Scandinavians. It's small pockets of Scandinavians mixed in with small pockets of essentially raiders from all these other areas, right? And they're all coalescing together for a common goal briefly, and then breaking apart and going off and doing their own thing, which is fascinating, right? Because now we're not talking about a Viking age where it's just Scandinavians doing all the work. It's Scandinavians leading the charge, but then also rallying together people from the lands that they're roving in order to help them achieve their aims, right? I mean, these were true capitalists, right?
Well,
yeah,
that's a question, right? And actually, I've heard that put to you in other podcasts. I think maybe even in the Shindig one. It's like is what they're doing like an early form of capitalism? Right? I mean, it's hard to not like think of that. I mean, obviously because it's what we know, so we sort of make it relative to what we know, but. I mean, I even said that in the piece that I wrote. It's like, by our modern standards of how corporations work, and the Vikings are management, and the rest of the people are like the workers or something, these people that are coming and going that CJ's talking about. And the way they sort of seem to have structured it for their success seems kind of similar to what we got going on here in some ways.
Yeah, you're also going to get pushback when you transpose, modern economic terms.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you can't have the idea within the word capitalism and say that there's, I mean, again, inherent is probably the wrong word, but I think, people, again, anthropological studies seem to show that, where there is a way to develop a means of exchange, regardless of what that, if it's precious metal or whatever it is, cloth, people will realize that that's kind of the only way you can begin to expand and do things beyond your village. And that's what people end up doing, because people naturally kind of get bored with what they've got. They want to look over the horizon. And to do that with the neighboring valley, the neighboring village, you've got to develop a means of exchange. If you develop a means of exchange, which most societies seem to do all over the world and at all times, is capitalism, whatever you want to call it, but it's a way to facilitate you to get things that you want. And of course, people then will take that to success. People will be better at it than others, and winners and users. And this is no judgment call. I'm, very sort of centrist dad, as they say in these things. I'm like, people, do whatever makes them happy, and we should all, try and share the wealth where we can, but realizing that capitalism is just always a way that people are going to operate, because like democracy, it works, and a lot of people aren't happy with it all the time. But if you can present to the world an alternative that kind of works, that people will naturally gravitate towards, then sure. But I don't think there doesn't seem to be one at the moment.
I think that, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing when you talk, well, even in the title of your book, plug number 3, A Viking Market Kingdom. I mean, you're talking about markets, we still talk about markets, and you can use, language like supply and demand, of all kinds of commodities, whether it's, silver or human beings or cloth or maybe even salt, right, CJ?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, these things are things that we can relate to. And I think in some ways you can think, okay, some of the behaviors are already there. And like you say, like cross-culturally throughout human history, it's just a way people survive and get what they need or get what they want. And then, in the 18th century, Adam Smith just sort of codifies it in a certain way, and gives it to the world. But yeah, I think you can't escape the fact that it feels similar.